listening to the Northern Hunter Podcast, home of all things hunting, fishing, and outdoors in Alaska. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. My name is James Payne.
I'm Dalton Gray.
I'm Mariah Humphreys.
And we have the great pleasure of sitting down with Pete Buist today. Thanks for joining us, man.
Good evening.
Yeah, we're going to have a full evening of stories, I assume, just based on how the pre-conversation went. So I'm excited for those. You're a man of many stories. And
I'm full of them.
Yeah. And you wrote some of them down. So you are the author of the book, Me Caribou is on Fire. Is that right?
Indeed. And I appreciate the chance to pimp that book while I'm on here today. I have for many years, and I don't know how or why I got started, but I started keeping diaries and journals while I was on hunting trips and when I traveled and that sort of thing.
Mm.
And I regularly shared copies of those. I keep notes on a little notebook in my pocket, and then when I got back from the trip, I would type those notes up, transcribe them out,
Mm-hmm.
and embellish them. And I shared them with friends and family, and a number of those people, almost all of them, kept pestering me, "You got to write a book." And for many years, no, I didn't have to write a book. But finally, during COVID, when I was bored to tears, it seemed like the perfect time, and I went back through what seemed like hundreds of diaries and picked out some things that I thought would be not just descriptions of hunts and trapline trips and that sort of thing, but things that had amusing things that had happened.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think of myself as having a pretty fair sense of humor, and it tends to show in my writing. It might even manifest itself here tonight. And so during COVID, I picked 10 or 12 of those things, and I converted each one of those diaries to a chapter in a book, and got through it. The part where I started converting diaries to chapters was fun. Going back through those old diaries was pretty cool. Some of them I hadn't looked at for over 40 years.
Oh, I can imagine.
And now when I'm selling the book, that's fun. The part in the middle was just a lot of work.
Yeah.
As it turns out, I'm a pretty good storyteller. I am not an English teacher. And so I had help from 12 people,
Wow.
several of them authors already,
Mm.
and got that help proofreading. I didn't even know what an Oxford comma was, and now I know exactly where they go in the story. But I would be happy to share this with anybody who blesses me with $25. I'll autograph a book and send it to them. And the best way is through my email, which is petebuist, petebuist @gmail.com. And get a hold of me, and we'll work out a way for me to chisel $25 out of you.
Well, that sounds amazing. And for an autograph copy, too.
Autograph copy,
$25
too,
for an autograph copy.
Yeah.
And remind us of the title of the book, Pete.
It is indeed, because it's Me Caribou is on Fire, and that is the name of the first chapter, and it has to do with a friend of mine from Australia. I traded hunts with other outfitters all over the world.
Oh, sure.
And a couple of guys were visiting from Australia, and one had a hard time with a caribou, and when he reshot it, the projectile went into the sternum and of the caribou, which was now within about 3 feet of this fellow, and came out down near its nether regions and hit a rock, and the rock went up in the air and came down and hit him in the middle of the forehead and knocked him out. And the kid that was guiding him came running up, and all Dan knew was he'd pulled the trigger, and then there was blood in his eyes all over the place. He says, "What's the matter, Dan?" He says, "I think I shot myself." And Glenn's looking around because back in those days we didn't have radios or InReach or sat phones or anything. So he's thinking, "Oh, I wonder when Pete's going to come back and check on us." One of our guys bleeding to death here on the gravel bar, and he looks up around, and the Aussie guy is kicking the caribou around its head and chest, and he says, "Now what?" And Dan uttered those immortal words. He said, "Me caribou's on fire." And he'd been shooting a black powder 45-90, and at a range of 2 feet, there's enough unburned powder catching on fire as it comes out of the muzzle that he had set those long white hairs on the caribou's chest on fire. So I thought, as that sat on the bookshelf in Barnes & Noble, somebody might see that and say, "What the heck is that?" and actually buy it.
Right.
Well, I can tell you it worked for me. So
I have some spare copies in the truck if you'd like to purchase one.
Perfect.
Okay.
Excellent.
Well, if that's not a teaser, I don't know what is, but I'm very excited for the rest of this episode. But before we get too crazy away here, Dalton, you mind kicking off our little news segment?
Yeah, so just a couple of days ago, Mariah sent an article to the group chat here with the three of us, and the title is from Alaska Public Media. And just briefly here, the title reads, "Alaska Senate passes bill that ties hunting and fishing residency requirements to PFD eligibility." So PFD, for folks that aren't from around these parts, is a permanent fund dividend, which they continue to attempt to make a temporary fund dividend. I expected more claps from that.
Oh, that was good.
Anyway.
Sorry.
In a 15-5 vote, the senators of Alaska approved Senate Bill 171, which would tie residency to PFD eligibility, and that means that in most cases, you can't leave the state for more than 180 days during the year and remain eligible for residency. There are exceptions for people in the military, college students, and some others, though there's some debate about how consistently those are applied in practice. So basically, they're trying to eliminate in some regions of Alaska, specifically in this article, that they referenced a few folks that live down in the Southeast Islands, down around Prince of Wales.
Oh, gotcha.
And they had some issues with folks that owned a home.
Like a vacation home kind of thing.
And they would come up for the spring and summer and part of the fall, and they would be eligible for subsistence fishing.
Oh, gotcha.
Because they lived in Alaska at one point, purchased a home, but now they, I suppose the word would be snowbird out of the state, and they live somewhere else for where it's difficult, for when it's difficult to live up here, and then they would come back and take advantage of residency rights up here. And some of the locals were not thrilled about that, and so they introduced a bill, and now it's going to the House. So it's not set in stone yet.
Right.
But it seems to have a decent amount of traction. I think it got voted in 15-4 or something like that. Yeah, so 15-5 it got voted in the Senate.
Yeah. I know snowbirding isn't like a bad thing necessarily, especially when you get up older in age, but there's definitely, I could see how some people could take advantage of it, especially when it comes down to like subsistence privileges, because that is a benefit that is given to people who live primarily off of that source of protein or whatever they're gathering. And so,
and I think part of the problem is not all these people, it sounds like, we're even classifying as like retired age folks. A lot of these people, it sounds like they're our age or, middle age, working age people that are just coming back up because they want to fish and they want to be able to hunt and maintain residency. So now those requirements will be a little bit stouter.
Yeah.
If this gets through the House.
And to be fair, I mean, if you've put in 40, 50 winters up here, you can go do whatever you want. Nobody's going to complain about that.
Right.
But yeah.
Not from us.
Right.
The biggest thing I would be curious about this with the PFD is like the PFD is tied to the calendar year, not the time that you get to Alaska.
Yeah.
So if let's say you moved here on January 5th, well, the next January 5th that rolls around, you haven't been in Alaska from January 1st to January 1st yet because you moved here on the 5th. This has happened to. So now you've got to wait another year to be here Jan 1st to Jan 1st. before you're qualified to get your PFD. So I'm curious now if the kind of the worser part of this is that now when you move here, if you don't move here like right around January 1st or just before, like on or before, you're going to have to wait 2 years before you can hunt as a resident.
Interesting. Well,
that would be something to look into with this, because that would be that would rub people the wrong way a lot.
I don't think they mentioned that in this article, but
it depends if they're running it straight, copy paste from the PFD, because I mean, if that's the case, and that's what they're going to do.
I think the biggest thing they're trying to eliminate is, the biggest thing I think they like about it is, this is listed in the article, it says you can't leave the state for more than 180 days during the year and remain eligible. Right.
That's the big one. Yeah.
That's the big thing about it.
Is the 1 year versus 2 years, if you move up here 3 or 4 days late, going to be a factor included that they're just not talking about right
they're
now.
Probably going to take that into consideration. Most of our people in the house up here are pretty savvy. They'll probably figure something out.
And for anybody listening that's one of our military members or anything like that that comes up here kind of outside of your own accord, what happened with me when I moved here was they literally handed me paperwork day one and said, hey, if you want to surrender your Kansas residency and accept Alaska residency, sign this paper, you're good to go. And I did. And went down, got my driver's license, and boom, I was a resident. So I don't know if that's still the way it works. That was back in 2009, but I mean, I'm sure there's still some form of exception for if you get sent up here.
Right.
Somewhat against your will. Right. So,
there's ways for members of the military to hunt without paying non-resident fees and license tax.
Yeah.
I know. I'm not against it at all.
I'm not either.
I see the idea of a lot of people coming up here, having lived here, like say at one time, and they show up for a week.
Yeah.
And they pay resident prices to go hunt or fish, or even if they show up for a month and pay resident, if they can afford to show up for a week or a month and do that, they can afford to contribute a little bit more to the
non-resident fees.
Yeah.
Probably have that California guy to thank for this.
Maybe so. Anyhow.
But anywho's, so that's an exciting thing that's coming down. You want to take the next one? Or
the other one is just going to take like 30 seconds here. BLM is set to vote against the Ambler Mine project road. Anyway, that we don't have to read anything about that, but I saw some news about it. For the time being, it looks like BLM is set to stomp the Ambler Mine road project.
There.
Yeah. So BLM is on the federal side.
Yeah.
And so if they vote
and that's
out,
cutting through BLM land pretty much entirely, right?
It's
no state land.
Yeah, there's a lot of federal land up there.
That's what I figured,
You have the federal park up there on the west side of the road where the road's going to go in. Well, where the proposed mining road was supposed to be going through.
Right.
So it looks like that is on a temporary hold anyway. That's not to say that won't ever happen. This is after a long review period of migration corridors and ground nesting bird surveys and what waterways it crosses and all these other things that they have to consider. And not that that's all a bad thing, and whichever side of this that you fall on, if you're for it or against it, this is what they're doing right now. So we're just updating the situation because we've talked about this before.
Right.
Yeah.
So
no, and that's something you deal with all over Alaska. I was looking at moving to Cordova at one point, taking over communications plant down there, and I was looking at property. I went down there for a month-long stint to see if I liked it, and it rained 29 out of the 30 days. But
welcome to the Southern Coast.
And I said, "Get me back to Fairbanks." But I was looking at property, and I was talking to people and locals and stuff like that because I just wanted to build a house because every house that I found for sale was
1950s.
The roof was caving in, and there was moss on the sides.
That is a moldy place, man.
And but they were telling me about the process of that and how even if you buy the land and you own the land, you've got to have somebody come out and look at it and survey it and make sure it's not nesting ground or anything like that. And I'm like, well, why is the land for sale if it's not, if it affects all this different stuff? But it's just part of the process. It's where you live. It's part of what it is. So you just got to deal with it. Honestly, I'm kind of glad that they put a lot of thought and effort into, the wildlife management and stuff like that. But, our opinion has always been, we side with the people of Ambler and the surrounding villages. Like, I personally would love to see a road go in. I would love to see more industry come to Alaska. I'd love to see more income for the state.
Right.
I would love to see, things grow. I mean, we have 2.5 times the land mass of Texas, and half the roads of Rhode Island, right? It's like
Yeah.
a ridiculous amount of limited road access.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also a good thing in a way. You know, you don't want
Right.
to over access, but
Yeah.
you know, people talk a lot about encroachment and, you know, oh, this guy's hunting on top of me and this. And, well, you give more places for people to spread out. That's going to stop happening, you know, because then people can spread out more.
And they're all going to go up there.
And you don't have to pay thousands of dollars for a plane ticket, right?
Yeah.
Because it's all the guys that can't afford the $1,000 plane ticket or multi-$1,000 plane tickets that are encroaching. So
Yeah.
you make it easier for them to spread out. It'll solve a lot of problems for everybody. But, you know, ultimately speaking, if the people of Ambler and the surrounding villages are against the road,
Yeah.
hey, that's your call. It's
Yeah.
your area.
Yeah.
Like,
From what I understand, they're for it.
yeah, that's
They're for
everything
it,
I've seen too.
and-
There's been a little bit of back and forth, you know, from I
Mhm.
think like the elders versus the younger generation, maybe. But like, and I've seen some Facebook comments that seem to go back and forth with residents of, you know, the villages out there. But you know, it is what it is, and I'm gonna side with the people of the area because
Yeah.
that's their home, right?
Mhm.
You don't want a highway to your home? I don't blame you. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of people live out in the middle of nowhere for a reason.
Mhm.
So if you want to stay in the middle of nowhere, then I don't blame you. But anyway, we don't have to get too crazy into that topic, but it is interesting that they're going to be voting against it. I'd be
Yeah.
curious to read more on that,
Yeah.
honestly.
I think there's going to be a lot more coming out about it over the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I'm wondering how long they're going to drag this project out, if it's going to be like another Pebble Mine situation.
You look up, I was going to say, reference the
Yeah.
Pebble Mine situation.
20
and
plus
how
years, bro.
long that
Yeah.
drug out. This
20
is going
plus
to be
years.
This is going to be a long one.
Yeah.
Environmental impact aside, the biggest difference between this and the Pebble Mine is the people in Ambler are for this.
True.
Mhm.
Very
Right.
true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, way less of an impact from what I've understood as far
Yeah.
as like what Pebble was proposing.
It
and
doesn't
what this is
seem
gonna
to
be.
me, from what I've read, that there is any more of an impact risk to the environment or the wildlife than the Dalton Highway was.
Right.
It doesn't look like there's anything more different than that.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference is this is 50 years later.
Right.
Right. Oh, and there were people
Right.
against the pipeline in the Dalton Highway.
Oh, there
too.
were tons of
Mhm.
people against it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's still people that, you know, go both ways as far as research goes.
But
Some
do you
people
know-
say that, oh, the road doesn't affect it at all. And other people, you'll look up accredited individuals that say it does. And it's like, who do you trust?
And
Kind of
you
thing.
know what the difference is, though? The pipeline was not having to deal with the federal side of it.
That's true.
You know, this was the state's decision. Ultimately, said, "All right, punch it in."
Yep.
What reasons they were going off of that for? We've kind of theorized about what those reasons might have been, but at the end of the day, the state made the decision.
Mhm.
The state can't just say, "All right, punch in the Ambler Road." They
Right.
can't.
Right.
It's federal land.
Right.
Well, I mean,
Thanks,
the
Jimmy
pipeline
Carter.
crossed a ton of federal land too.
Well,
But
it wasn't like it
It
is
was
now.
a different.
it was
a different.
It was a
time.
supported.
It was a
event,
different
though.
time in the
Yeah.
country. I mean,
Yeah,
we were reading about this a while back. Not to get off into the weeds, but at the same time,
I think
the
we're knee
pipeline was
deep in
going
weeds
in.
right now.
Yeah, we are. At the same, I mean, the pipeline went in. What year was that?
76,
It was
75.
in the 70s. So
Something like that.
75.
75.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right up before that, there was a finished proposal to dam the Yukon River.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. That would have been horrific.
Mo and I were
Could you
looking at the
imagine?
impact of that dam and had
Yeah.
that gone
Dude.
in.
Could you imagine?
Yeah. Huge.
I mean, we would you
Oh,
talk
the-
about not having kings. We wouldn't have kings, but we'd have plenty of electricity and cheap.
No, they'd still find a way to charge you out
Oh,
the
yeah.
wazoo for it.
Yeah. Anyway,
The Great Lake of Alaska.
It would have been.
Golly.
Well, it probably would have been the Rampart Lake or something because that's where they were going to build.
There
the
wouldn't have
dam,
been a
but-
rampart left.
No, Rampart, I believe, was down the river from it. But
Yeah. Either way, let's take a break real quick.
all right, folks. We all know that one of the most common mishaps in hunting is damage to your rifle scope. Last year, I found the solution to that problem with the Stealthy Hunter rifle cover. It wraps around your scope and actions securely to protect it from getting knocked off of zero or even severely damaged. Stealthy Hunter also has a glassing pad and a wide variety of supplements for the outdoorsman, such as protein powder, CBD products, turmeric, and gut health supplements. They also make a lightweight trauma kit weighing in at just 14 ounces that includes everything you need and nothing you don't for all of your backcountry medical emergencies. To shop all of their equipment and supplements, go to stealthyhunter.com and enter the discount code at checkout, The Northern Hunter, to save on your order today. All Stealthy Hunter equipment is proudly made in the USA.
All right, Pete. So you obviously have some great stories to tell. Why don't we try to go back to a little bit about your background and how you got up to Alaska?
I am originally from, and I don't often admit this, I'm originally from New Jersey, which is not exactly a wilderness enclave. But even when I was little, I could read, and I read all about Alaska, and I said, I gotta get there.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't see any. I did a lot of small game hunting, deer hunting, that sort of thing back in New Jersey, but I wanted to go big time.
Oh yeah,
and never saw any particular opportunities to do that. I had too many chores to do around the house, and it wasn't going to happen. And then one day, actually the same day that I graduated from forestry school, I drove back to New Jersey from Syracuse, and there was a notice in the mail from my friends and neighbors at the local draft board. And they said that the world would not be safe for democracy unless I participated.
Mm-hmm.
And
go save the day.
So I went from college graduate to 11 Bravo pretty darn quick. But I was I did my basic at Fort Dix, New Jersey, and then that wasn't warm enough, so I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for AIT. And I was in a graduation formation there, and the first sergeant says, "Is there anybody in this formation?" Now, realize for the last 8 weeks, we've been learning how to dig holes and get in them and duck when people shot at us and stuff like that. Is there anybody in this formation that can type? 3 of us gingerly raised our hands. And as it turned out, that was a good move, because the 3 of us got sent to Fort Wainwright, Alaska, and the rest of them went to Vietnam to get shot at.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So I got out my prayer rug and said a little prayer to my 10th grade typing teacher, and I typed with a vengeance the whole time I was here.
There you go.
And what year would that have been, Pete?
That was back in the early 70s,
Okay.
just before the war was over.
Yeah.
And so when it came time to get out, the re-enlistment people tried to get me to stay, and I couldn't see any reason to stay in. And my plan, such as it was to get out and make $1 million trapping in the winter, firefighting in the summer, and guiding in the spring and the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And that lasted until the next fall, when it turned out my wife was pregnant and neither one of us had insurance, and I had to get a job.
Had to join the rat race.
had to get a job that had insurance. But I actually started guiding before I got out of the military, but we'll save that for the guide part. The bottom line is it's I mean, I'm just another old fat man now, but it's pretty cool for a skinny high school kid to be trapping muskrats in New Jersey one week and then on his way to Alaska and end up becoming an Alaska master guide, doing time on the Alaska Board of Game, being on the Big Game Commercial Services Board, being president of the Alaska Trappers Association. There's not much that I would change about my life. I've had a grand time in Fairbanks. I was sentenced to work in Anchorage for a couple of years. I had to do that, but in my spare time from all the guiding and that sort of thing, I worked as a forester for Alaska Division of Forestry and Department of Natural Resources. I did timber sale administration in the winter and forest fire work in the summer. And I retired after about 35 years. I kept doing firework until I was 72, and it was getting a little tougher to pass the fire line physical. And so They give you a 45-pound pack and tell you to walk 3 miles in less than 45 minutes, and you can't jog.
Ooh.
And when I was 30, that was not a big deal. Well, we had a different test then, but over the years, it became more difficult. When I was 72, it kind of took my breath away. So I retired from firefighting as well.
Okay. Well, that sounds like you lived the life of about 10 men then.
And 3 girls. Yeah.
3 girls.
Oh boy, that's funny.
So that's a lot to unpack. So you came up here with the military then.
I did.
And what was that? Was that like a dream come true when you found out that you were coming to Wainwright? I mean, after wanting to be in Alaska anyways before the draft.
My heart rate was up, and I was pretty excited about coming to Alaska. The fact I had to do it while being in the Army was not at all exciting.
I know the feeling.
or even remotely tasteful. But it was the key to getting here.
Yep. We might. Did you ever live in 1001, the barracks building when you were on? No. Okay. I was wondering if it was still it's a historic building now. So I was wondering if we'd ever lived in the same barracks building. But
no, I was married when I got here.
Okay, gotcha.
And they told me that since upon my arrival I was a PFC, and since I was not an E5 or above, I was not allowed to live in married housing. On post. Gotcha. So I went and rented a place downtown or out of town up on Chena Ridge, and happily lived there.
Yeah.
Got a dog team and stored my snow machines and that kind of stuff. And not that this has anything to do with hunting, but about 3 months before I was due to get out, I got a call from a lady in the housing office, and she says, "Sergeant Buist, yes. Where do you live?" I said, "I live at 2 Mile Chena Ridge." She says, "Well, since you're a sergeant, you have to live on post now." I said, "No kidding." And I did know. I just hadn't bothered to check in great detail. I said, "Well, what would you like me to do?" And she says, "Well, you have to move on post." I said, "Well, I'm getting out pretty soon. It really doesn't make any sense. And besides, I've got a dog team and a Jeep and a bunch of snow machines." I say, "You don't want me living on post." And the lady says, "Well, you have to move on post." I said, "Well, what happens if I don't?" She says, "Well, we'll start the paperwork and force you to move on post." I said, "How long does that paperwork take?" She said, "Generally about 6 months." I said, "Well, start her up."
Perfect.
And 'twas the last I heard from the housing office.
Oh, I love it.
Just out of curiosity, on a little side note there, what kind of snow machines did you have back then?
Well, I was a PFC making $179 a month plus a housing allowance. And since we enjoyed eating food, my wife went out and got a job, and she worked in the credit department at Penny's.
Oh.
And got a 20% discount on everything at Penny's. And Penny's was the Arctic Cat dealer at the time.
Oh, gotcha.
So when Arctic Cat cheetahs came on sale that winter at Penny's, I got the sale price plus another 20% off, and I was in business.
Nice.
Wow.
There you go.
Back when the department stores sold motorized goods.
Yeah.
Did Penny's ever have a gun counter?
I believe they did.
Wow.
I believe they did.
Wow.
I was more interested in a snow machine. I had a lot of guns already.
Yep. That's all those old stores. I mean, have you ever seen one of those old Sears catalogs?
Yes.
Good night. They sold
Yes.
everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Sears had their own line of firearms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And Penny's. And I mean, now it's just clothes. Just a clothes store.
Yeah.
Good job, Shaq.
And Penny's is gone, but you can go buy a sofa from Sadler's there now.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Yep. They've been gone for a while now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So talk about, did you pretty much hit the ground running when you got here as far as hunting and trapping and all that stuff goes, or?
I got here in May, and in those days, the moose season in Unit 20 started on August 20th. And on the 19th of August, I got with another guy who thought himself to be a pretty hot stuff when it comes to deer hunting back east, as did I, and we could barely spell moose. We drove out behind Alaskan Air Force Base on those gravel roads out there, and went to sleep in the evening, got up in the morning, picked up the binoculars, and there was a little paddle bowl down in a lake at the bottom of the hill. And we were at the end of the road. That's probably notable to mention that. So we raced down there and we shot that bull, and then we started looking around to see how far back it was to the road. And that's how I learned to be more careful where you shoot moose. But I hunted moose for about 2 hours in the first moose season I ever participated in, and shot a moose. So
Nice.
Wow.
I was pretty full of myself.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
They're not quite as skittish as whitetails are.
No,
Yeah.
No,
but a lot heavier.
Yeah.
there were a few more around back then, huh?
I think there were. More to the point, there were a lot less hunters.
That
was pre-pipeline, and it was just, we didn't even see anybody else. But back there, if you went back there on the opening day of moose season now, there'd be, 87 four-wheelers and 6 side-by-sides and drones. And
Did you got any idea what the population of the Fairbanks area was back then?
I don't recall.
No.
I
Yeah.
don't recall.
What were you up to now? Like 100,000, something like that?
I don't know.
We're like a small city now.
I thought we were still under 100,000.
I think the borough's up to 100,000. I think
Oh.
Fairbanks proper might be a lot less than that.
Yeah,
But,
probably.
Yeah, Fairbanks proper is 32,000.
yeah, then you got Wainwright, North Pole, Alaskan, all
Alaskan.
kind of clustered.
Borough is 95.
95, yeah. So quite a few people. That's
Down from 100,000 in 16.
okay.
Now
so
we're getting somewhere.
yeah, keep that trend going.
Yeah. Yeah. Get out.
Come up, pay a guide, and leave.
That's right. That's right. You got to keep us busy.
So speaking of which, talk about that a little bit. So you said you got into guiding before you even got out of the military, right?
I did. The last spring that I was in the military, 4 of us, I was an E5, there's another E5, there was an E9 and a captain, all got together and flew. We drove, all 4 of us, in the front of a pickup truck. I didn't weigh 250 pounds in. Drove down to Fort Rich and stayed in our old battalion commander's quarters down there, slept on the floor in sleeping bags. Then he took us out to the airport the next day and dropped us off. We flew Reeve Airways to Cold Bay, got our military discounts on our tickets, jumped off at Cold Bay, and then chartered a Goose back up the peninsula a little ways.
Wow.
And set up a camp and commenced to hunt bear. Well, in the next bay over was a master guide who had 7 assistant guides and registered guides working for him.
Wow.
And at the end of a couple of weeks, they had 1 bear and we had 4. And so we had run into one of those guides who one of the registered guides who was working for that contracting guide. And he noticed that we had a lot of dead bears and they had very few, and that we were, nice to talk to out on the mountainside and that sort of thing. And he said, well, if any of you guys want a job as a packer, maybe later as an assistant guide, here's my card. So we all said, yeah, well, we want to do it. And eventually 2 of us did go to work for that fellow. It was Red Beeman from Chugiak. And I worked for him that fall. And for 5 or 6 years after that, including after I passed the registered guide test, I worked for Red, and then eventually went to work for myself.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, and you made it all the way up to master guide yourself, correct?
I did.
And number 79, is that right?
They say that having a 2-digit guide number like that is a pretty good indication that you're, old.
Wow.
They're probably not wrong.
There's
that is
no
impressive.
test for master guide. It's just a matter of being in business for a while, keeping your nose clean, not being cited for things, and getting recommendations from your clients, and bingo, there you are. A master guide can't do anything a registered guide can't do,
Right.
but it's good for the ego, and it's good advertising.
Yeah, absolutely.
It shows you've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
So overall, how many years did you guide then before you got out of that?
Let's see. About 40.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a long career.
Yeah.
It's
But
amazing.
I didn't take a lot of hunters. And that's part of why I got out. It was getting to the point where for me to amortize all my costs and do all that paperwork, I would have had to take more hunters, and I didn't want to. I just wanted to take 4 or 5 guys a year. And a lot of times I whizzed away that opportunity by trading hunts with somebody in Africa or Australia or New Zealand, someplace fun. And most years, my assistant guides went home with more money in their pocket than I had. So but man, it was great. It was great.
Yeah. Wow. I think you have probably enough stories to write a second book, Pete.
Yeah, well, there is no sequel. The first one wasn't that much fun.
You got to learn to use more of those Oxford commas.
I was going to say, you got to use all that stuff you learned.
Trust me, I've got more stories. I'm just running out of inclination.
Wow.
Well, we'll have to keep you coming back, give you a platform. You can just speak them. That way you don't have to worry about writing anything down.
Campfire guiding stories with Pete Buist.
We'll make a whole segment.
Yeah. So you mentioned before we started recording about bear hunting. That's kind of our bread and butter, what we want to talk to you about today. And you said you've got a lot of years of a variety of styles of bear hunting. Just kind of pick one particular style of hunt or type of bear that you got started with, and just roll on with some bear hunting stories.
Well, I thought probably a good way to start would be to mention what it was like baiting bears 50 years ago here in the interior.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, myself and 2 of my military buddies were the only ones doing it. I mean, nobody was bothering to do it.
Wow.
And so it was sort of uncharted territory. I started in the early 70s there. There were no baiting regulations, none. It was completely unregulated. You had seasons and you had bag limits. And the season, like it is today for black bears in general, is 365 days a year.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If you wanted to bait right on through the winter, you could. And I mention that by to put a point on the fact that we hauled our bait drums out all sealed up in the spring with a track rig, and we'd pile 8 or 10 of them at a site, and we'd open them up as they were needed. And in those days, we were using used cooking grease from Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Yep.
And they used lard at the time, and that was just the right consistency. And bears loved it, and I grew to hate that smell.
Every bear just smelled like cooking grease.
Exactly, at both ends. But there were considerations that related to that. What one was in terms of leaving an open drum in the wintertime, which served absolutely no purpose in terms of bears, was that it attracted a lot of mice, and the mice attracted a lot of marten. So we trapped marten off our black bear bait sites.
Perfect.
And supplemented our meager income. Remember, I was making $179 as a PFC. I was making a little bit more later as a E5. But during pipeline construction days, it became evident there were a lot of idiots running up and down the haul road and in the camps that were feeding peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and things to wolves and bears, and it was causing problems. So the Board of Game passed a regulation you could not feed any big game, which included the black bears of the interior. And so suddenly baiting was illegal, and it was for several years. After a few years, it was specifically allowed by the Board of Game. I don't remember how that came to pass, but they did legalize it. But by that time, everybody had been prohibited from doing it, and now all of a sudden you could do it, and now everybody knew that.
Gotcha.
And so every other guy with a can of bacon grease and a rifle or a bow was a black bear baiting expert.
Right.
And so it really ballooned in popularity after it came back on the scene there. There was still no limit to the number of baits.
Okay.
And so and these were the guys that I'd been in the Army with. And by that time, that E9 had retired, and the captain had gone on to greater things in the Army there, but he was still here in town. He eventually got out and worked for me as an assistant guide, and then got his registered guide license, and then flew his airplane in the side of a mountain. But that's a whole other story. But there was no limit on the number of baits, and so we had about 40 baits between here and generally what we did, rather than guiding hunters over bait, and that really doesn't take a lot of guidance, what we did was rent bait sites.
Nice.
And so for, I don't remember what we charged, $100 or something like that, for a guy to sit up to 3 nights. And we guaranteed that he'd see a bear. Not that he'd shoot one, but that he'd see one. And so we did that for quite a while. Eventually, as baiting caught on, there was a lot more competition along the. We moved on further out west of back out towards, and we did out there for a while, and eventually I moved the other side of, and then when I kind of got sick of it and my boys were interested still, we got rid of the less than productive baits and maintained the ones that were really good. By that time, I had some baits over in that area that had been in the same place for close to 25 years.
Wow.
And generations of bears had learned where those sites were.
Right.
And we had bears that we recognized. And our theory was always to only shoot big bears. And when you don't shoot the first furry black thing that comes in, you can end up shooting big bears.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what we became very selective, and that's how we
that's the biggest
shot some big bears.
That's the biggest benefit of baiting, is the selectivity.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly. Exactly.
And were you gun hunting or bow hunting off most of these baits?
Both. Now, by that time, I was out of the bow hunting business. I mentioned to you guys earlier, I had a dog sledding accident over near McGrath and tore up a shoulder real bad. And so it got to the point where I couldn't pull a bow back. I in fact, for a year and a half, I couldn't even raise my left arm. So bow hunting was a little problematic.
Yeah.
But that led me into a whole new pursuit. Some of the exploits are in the book. I took up muzzleloader hunting because that was the next best thing, and had a lot of fun with that.
That'd be really fun to shoot a black bear over a bait with a muzzleloader.
It would be great,
or a grizzly bear for that matter.
Yeah, that would be an awesome thing to do.
You know what? And I have one, and I haven't even shot it yet.
Yeah.
That's my project.
I might have to get that from you.
No,
Hey.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to hang on to that baby.
Hey.
If it makes you feel better, they're $150 down at Sportsman's.
Yeah.
Well, there's a story behind this one.
Yeah. Well, he gave it to me. So
Neener.
This is my grandfather's muzzleloader we're talking about.
well, I know what he gave you, so give it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll let you use one of them.
So what were some of your most entertaining memories of those early days of bear baiting? Any nights that stand out of just crazy stuff happening? And
I've had nights where we saw probably 10 or 12 individual bears multiple times.
Mm.
My theory was always especially when we were using that lard-based KFC grease, was to have it near a water source because, as you probably know, if you've eaten a lot of KFC grease, it's good to have a drink of water once in a while. And if you can find a spot where a bear can lay up and snooze and get a drink of water and have that grease to fiddle with,
mm-hmm.
he will just lay on it and stay on it over and over and over.
Yeah.
But we've seen like 12 individual bears in a night easily on some of these baits. It was pretty impressive. Now, not because baiting became somewhat mundane. One thing I did yesterday when I was making some of these notes is I checked back through my diaries on all the bear hunts, and I've been in on, meaning I had my hands on the evidence. I've been in on 438 black bear kills.
Wow.
There's not much I don't know about skinning black bears.
My goodness.
And I never have to skin another one.
Wow.
Now, I've shot a truckload of them. My boys have shot a truckload of them. I've guided for them. I've gone and worked with, clients that shot them, and I had to deal with them. So that's a lot of stinking black bears.
Yeah.
Wow.
That is a lot of black bears.
So when black bear baiting became a little more mundane, one of the things I decided to try, and at the time the state had just allowed a permit for it, was hunting with dogs.
Yep.
Common down in the States. You go to Idaho or, Colorado, places like that. They're just nutso on chasing bears with dogs.
Oh yeah.
Well, I've always had hounds. I even had hounds while I had my Huskies for sled dog team for a while in a crossbreeding project that didn't go all that well. But I always had, in those days, I always had at least 3 or 4 hounds around. And I scooped up one of those permits, and I had been with guys who hunted bear with dogs down in the States. But it's way different up here. If you're down there, and even in just about any place in the Rocky Mountain West, you don't hear the dogs anymore. You just drive around the other side of the mountain and listen for them.
Right.
That's not an option here.
No.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, what we need is some GPS collars, so I'll know exactly where they are. Well, pretty soon I'm knowing exactly where they are, and I still can't get to them.
Mm-hmm.
You can take the receiver and get up in a Super Cub and fly over in the direction they went. You can find them, and you still can't get to them. So I learned some things like don't put dogs out on a bear track unless there's plenty of big trees around that bears will go up.
Right.
And every once in a while you get a bear a black bear around here that's so big and fat that it won't go up a tree, and they'll just run and run and run. That's a problem. But you can't drive around to the other side. You can't dump dogs in a place with no trees. You can't make the mistake of dumping dogs on a grizzly track either.
Right.
I learned that the hard way.
I can only imagine.
Grizzlies are really tough on hounds.
Yeah.
And
I can only imagine.
I think that's probably an understatement.
Yeah.
Man.
so I'm down to one slightly used 12-year-old blue tick hound in my house right now, and but he knows his calling. He has not chased a bear in Alaska, but I take him with me in the wintertime. Remember before when we were ranking on people who went outside in the winter? I do that now.
But you've done the 40, 50 winters, right?
I put in my time.
Yep.
But now I go back to my family place in New Jersey, which is not like being in, New Jersey, basically a hazmat site with some flowers in it. But our place is pretty nice. It's 300 acres. That's an inholding in 30,000 acres of state public hunting ground.
Oh, wow.
And
very nice.
And
Beautiful.
apparently there's some kind of law in New Jersey. I've never seen it written down, but if you're one of those fat guys in an orange coat that's going to hunt on the public hunting ground, especially 30,000 acres of it, apparently you're not allowed to get more than about a quarter mile from the truck, because when we get out in the middle of that, we just don't see anybody. It's
Really?
like having 20 or 30,000 acres of private land. It's pretty cool. I trapped coyotes and coons there and everything. But New Jersey over the last few years has developed a rather amazing black bear population.
I've been hearing about that.
And in northern New Jersey, where I am, our place is actually north of New York City. We have about 3.5 bears per square mile. And when you put that up against the number of people that are mashed into that area at the same time, there's a lot of dang bears.
That's a healthy population. Yeah.
And so my hound dog Tucker loves to chase bears, and I don't mind him chasing them a little bit in the daytime. But year before last, on December 27th, I heard a ruckus by the kitchen door, and I got up and went and turned on a porch light, and my nose was about 2 feet from the nose of a large black bear.
Wow.
And so I went back to the bedroom. I keep 2 shotguns there, one with buckshot for when things get down and dirty, and I keep another one loaded with cracker shells or rubber buckshot and that sort of stuff. And I noticed that bear had been trying to get through the kitchen window, and there was dirty paw prints all over the kitchen window, and I was not convinced that he was just going to leave on his own, so I decided to open the door just a crack. And this is not all being done stealthily when you have a blue tick hound that knows there's a bear out there yelling at the same time. But when I opened that door, I guess I need to add that my normal attire when I'm in the bed is like a pajama top, but no bottom and no shoes. And so now I'm fully armed, but only half dressed. And I cracked the door open a little bit, going to stick that shotgun out and teach that bear a lesson. And Tucker the hound got past me and out into the dark. And all I could see on the stone steps going up towards the barn, I could just barely see in what little light I had, was this hound dog going nuts and a big furry bear butt.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, this is not going to end well, because he's going to take off and chase that bear for a long, long time. But for some reason, he hung up within 50 or 60 yards, and I started hearing some pretty amazing noises. Now, unbeknownst to me until the next day when I checked the trail cam, I thought we were only fighting one bear.
Oh.
As it turned out, we were fighting 2 bears simultaneously. And soon after Tucker caught up with those 2 bears up there by the barn, something happened. It was dark. I couldn't see, but something happened to convince him that it may not have been as good an idea as he originally thought. And he came back down the steps and past me and into the house. And so I ripped off some cracker shells, and I could hear those bears running off into the night. Like I say, it wasn't until the next day when I looked at the trail cam pictures, I realized it was 2 bears that we were fighting instead of 1.
Wow.
Somebody should have had video, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Emily stayed in the bed. She was smarter than me and Tucker.
There you go. How far away from you are you from Wildwood?
What, on the Jersey Shore?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't go to the Jersey Shore.
Yeah, that's my mom's side of the family's from over there.
Oh.
Just north of there, actually. It's a town that starts with an A. I don't know what the actual name of it is, but
Atlantic City.
Asbury Park.
Aberdeen or something, or
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't.
My uncle's a retired cop.
I left New Jersey, when I was about 20, and didn't have much use for it then. Got even less use for it now.
Yep.
The problem is I stay up on that mountain, and I hate to go down to the base of the mountain and go places because there's a lot of idiots driving there.
Yeah.
But sometimes, you need gas or you need groceries, and you just got to go.
Need more shotgun shells.
Need more shells. Yeah.
I have a quick question to wrap back around to bear baiting up here. So you mentioned a couple of regions of the state. Did you have encounters with grizzly bears coming into your baits back in the day? And did you notice an increase over time?
I have. Yes and yes. Back in the day, we fervently believed that anytime you had a grizzly on your bait, you were never going to see another black bear.
Mm-hmm.
Now we know that's not true.
Yeah.
But it only happened occasionally. But over the years, more and more grizzlies were showing up for sure.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
I never took a grizzly over bait. It was while I was still doing it. It wasn't legal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. It seems like that trend's just kind of continued too.
Yeah.
So.
It's interesting. There's a couple of theories out there about, possibly why the grizzlies have increased in population, aside from just being a more dominant animal, right? But there's some interesting theories out there that we might have to talk about off the air and see what your thoughts are on some of those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I work closely with Fish and Game. Like I said, I did a term on a board of game. I've always worked closely with the biologists here in town, and in fact, we used to use my dogs and my baits. We'd dump dogs onto a bait where a bear had just been seen, tree that bear and collar it, and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So I got involved in some of that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah,
That's pretty neat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very cool.
It's always interesting hearing about those old studies that they've done. Like when Carl was on here talking about barbed wire baits and everything. I mean, it's just cool stuff to hear about.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that's a hard thing to do. Guesstimating how many bears there are in an area and whatnot. I mean, they hide really well.
In an area that there's
you can't just fly over in a
Yeah.
helicopter or a Cub and count them. It's like it's got to be a challenging task. I mean, it's pretty cool to see the ingenuity that people come up with.
Mm-hmm. What was the biggest black bear that you guys ever can remember taking over a bait site, like squared size?
Oh, squared size? Oh, like 7.5.
Man,
Wow.
that is a
What
tank.
about like skull size?
We've killed two bears over 20 inches, nothing over 21.
Wow.
I killed one just over 20, and another friend of mine, a retired military guy here in town who just passed away a couple of years ago, he took one that was about 20 and a half.
Some big black
Ironically, both over the same bait,
Really?
same location.
Wow.
What was the average size of black bears you were seeing then? Like in big boars, when you're taking big boars, were they big?
Oh, we tried not to shoot anything under 6,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
preferably 6.5.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. I think a lot of the local stuff with bears being smaller on more local baits is really pressure.
They just get shot
No,
out.
it's-
Yeah.
Like you had pointed out, you shoot, you be selective and you shoot the big ones. That's a
Mhm.
good way to keep shooting big ones. I think with just the amount of pressure, the uptick in population and baiting popularity, I mean, I'm sure they're just get clobbered out there. And I mean, especially near town,
Yeah.
5.5 foot bear is like a good bear near Fairbanks now.
Yeah. Right.
But
So-
if somebody makes a rug out of a 5.5 foot bear, chances of him getting to be 7 foot pretty slim.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, that's like we had a client one time that shot a nice bear, a brown bear down on the coast, and I was just helping out on this hunt. My client had already killed a bear, so I went to another camp, and the hunter killed a bear, and he asked the other guide on the hunt that was kind of conducting that one. He said, "How big do you think he is?" And the guide responded, "Well, I don't know, but he's as big as he's going to get." The client wasn't really laughing as much as we are about that.
That jogged my mind on a story that I did not have notes on, but I now is coming back to me. I guided on Kodiak a fair amount, and in the camp that I worked for Master Guide Leon Francisco over on the west side at Old Uyak and Spearden, we had a code. We used a CB radio, and we didn't like to talk about bears or how we'd done on a radio. But the code was, if you call back in from the spike camp on a CB into main camp, and you said you needed like 9 loaves of bread, that meant you had a dead 9-foot bear.
Yeah.
So one night there were 2 assistant guides, me and another guide in that camp, and 2 hunters, and the other guide, his client had shot a bear that day, and so he gets on the radio and he mentions to Leon that he needs 9 loaves of bread. Leon says, "You want me to bring the skiff over?" And Rocky says, "No, we still got to go back up on the mountain and skin him." So the code was cracked.
There's probably a press release the next day. That's funny. Did you ever bump shoulders with Bill Pinnell and Morris Tallefson down there?
I met them, but not down there. I met them in Anchorage. I did guide for several years with Scott Malure, who guided in that camp, and worked for them extensively. So I got to hear all those stories. Plus, for 40 years here in town, I lived next door to Joe Want, who had also worked for P&T back in the day, and got nibbled on brown bears down there and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Man, that's a lot of history.
Didn't Scott write a book too, or was that somebody else that worked for?
Oh, there was another guy, a guy from Birchwood. I can't remember what his name was, but he wrote the book "Last of the Brown Bear Men" about P&T. Yeah.
That's on the top of my list to find that book, "Last of the Great Brown Bear Men."
That's a great book.
Yeah,
Great book.
I have it on my list, but every time I find a copy of it, it's quite pricey.
Well, buy it because it's not going to get cheaper.
Yeah,
exactly.
You're right.
After Scott took over the business down there, I hunted out of some of those P&T cabins, like at the south end of Carluck Lake.
Yeah,
and over at Red Lake at the headwaters of the Iakulik. I've hunted out of some of those camps. It's just classic brown bear country. And you'll climb up on a little knob and say, "Man, that's a good place to glass." And there's an old metal folding chair there or something where you just know it was them old guys parked in that chair glassing. It's pretty cool.
That is amazing.
What rifle and cartridge did you start guiding with for brown bear hunts in particular?
The same one I finished up guiding with, and that is a 338 Win Mag. And the only change I made to it over the years was, and it had open sights. The only thing I changed was after I shot 2 or 3 wooden stocks off of it, I put a plastic stock on it, and I painted the stock bright orange. The theory was, when a bear pokes its nose into camp and everybody's running around grabbing rifles and trying to cram shells into those rifles, usually I was the only one with an orange rifle. So
Yep.
That's not a bad idea.
That's actually a really good idea.
All these guys that have camouflage guns nowadays. Yeah.
Camouflage binoculars. I lost enough binoculars without putting down camouflage ones.
I've even heard of people like having a hard time finding their camo wheelers.
Yeah, I've heard those stories. Yeah. Park them in the middle of a willow patch somewhere, and good luck finding it.
Yeah.
Just wait long enough, it'll have a bear chewing on the seat. It'll show up.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You're absolutely right on that.
I just bought a new wheeler.
Did you?
I did.
I'm so proud of you.
I actually specifically had them build a tan one out like the camo hunter one. So
What'd you
I wouldn't
go
have
with?
a camo Can-Am.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's not a factory, normal, old, plain Jane Can-Am, though.
It's the new utility. It's the Can-Am Pro. It's the utility built.
Nice.
Basically built to beat the Grizzly.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit covetous.
Yeah.
They have more down there, I'm telling you.
Pete, the only reason that we give Mariah a hard time about four-wheelers is he is notoriously tough on his machinery. And
Yes.
he has a brute force Kawasaki that is, well, on its last leg in a hospital bed.
No, it's been on its last.
Yeah.
Hey, it is coming. It is on recovery right now. It's running. It's making power.
You
got
got
new
on an
shocks in the
IV
mail
drip, do
for it.
Life
That
support's
wheeler's not
beeping
going
over
anywhere.
here.
That thing's not going anywhere. Anyway.
Well, this may make you feel a little better because I have two Yamahas at my place in New Jersey. I had a 2016 Kodiak 700, and then I had an older but still running well, or so I thought, Grizzly.
Mm-hmm.
And earlier this year, I had some trouble getting that Grizzly to start. I use them for hauling logs. I cut firewood to sell while I'm down there. Use them for hauling logs, and I couldn't start that thing for love nor money. So I did what any red-blooded American redneck would do. I got a big old can of ether and hosed it down.
Yeah.
Then turned the key, and it farted once and caught on fire. And I looked around, and obviously there was no fire extinguisher. There was no puddle of water. There was nothing. So I grabbed the next best thing off the wall, which was an oily rag.
Yeah.
And commenced to beat the flames around that air cleaner box, and managed to destroy the burning air cleaner box and get pieces of burning black plastic embedded in my left hand.
Oh.
But I got that fire out. And I suffered almost as much trying to find parts for a 20-year-old four-wheeler as I did from the burning plastic.
Oh,
and
man.
then I had some trouble with my 2016. I took it over to the dealer. I'm not big on twisting wrenches. I said, put a couple hours of shop time on this and tell me what it needs. And so the guy said, okay, we've gone over it. We spent the 2 hours. So I went back over to pick it up. I said, what's it need? He says, it needs to go to the dump. It's about to catch on fire. I said, well, I already set one on fire this year. But this one had mice living in it, and they had shredded the wiring, and I had things that were arcing out inside. So again, I did what any red-blooded American redneck guy would do, is I sold it and bought me a new one.
Yep.
So I'm with you, man.
Runs great.
Yeah.
That's really
Facebook
funny.
Marketplace.
That's funny.
Don't
Well,
short.
we got off of bear hunting, didn't we?
Yeah.
Don't short me. I know what I have.
Yeah. No tire kickers.
Well, my boy bet me $10 that I couldn't even give it away because it was in pretty sorry shape. I pulled those inspection panels. There was a lot of bare wires under there.
Oh, I bet.
I sold it in one day for $1,400. So
Mhm.
Well, I'm
pretty proud of myself.
I'm still running my 2016 Grizzly 700, and it's been running fine.
Somebody's running mine.
Yeah. Or are they?
Or it's in a charred pile somewhere.
I sold it to a guy who claims to be my friend. Still.
There you go.
Yeah, well,
all
there
right.
you
Well, so just before we jump completely off the bear hunting, I wanted to pick your brain a little bit.
I got a lot more bear stories here.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about the way it was versus the way it is now. So when you guys started doing this, I mean, like way back in the day, were you ground blinding it, or did you guys build platforms?
No, we
tree
built
stands?
platforms.
Yeah.
We built platforms, but we only built those platforms like 6 or 8 feet high.
Mhm.
We didn't
Yeah.
build them high,
Yep. Just get above the brush a little bit.
just so we could see.
High as you could reach.
Yep. Exactly.
That's the way I grew up doing it with my dad.
Yep.
Nothing wrong with that.
And what kind of hacks did you guys use, or if any? Like, because we had Mariah's dad and his hunting partner in here 2 weeks ago now, I think it was.
Yeah.
And they were telling us about the little stop clocks that they would have if a bear walked across it.
Oh yeah,
and
we're
stop
break the
that.
string and tell you when the first bear came in. Yeah, we
Exactly,
thought that was
yeah.
high tech at the time there.
Yeah.
When they invented trail cameras, boy, you couldn't get the smile off my face after dealing with those string
Sure.
things.
Yeah.
I can only imagine. Yeah.
That's funny.
Any other crazy redneck hacks to bear baiting back in the day, or just pretty basic?
No, my theory was always use a lot of bait and they'll keep coming in.
Yep.
And if you use something that they can't eat a lot of, for example, just using like a 2-inch hole in the barrel rather than something they can stick their head in, they'll roll it around and it'll take them a while to get at that stuff. But as long as there's something in that drum, they'll keep coming back.
Yeah.
They'll come back again if there was once, say, dog food in there, and they get it all, and you haven't been out to refill it, they'll come back eventually. But when I was guiding hunters over bait, I wanted to see multiple bears in a night. I didn't have 5 days to wait for them to come back another time.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Did you see a lot of cinnamon bear?
Interestingly,
Out there?
over there, we would take maybe 10% cinnamon bear.
Really?
I was surprised. But that's when I look back through my diaries, that's what it was. Both my boys, their first bears were cinnamon bears. I've never killed a cinnamon bear.
Wow.
I've passed up some smaller cinnamon bears because I was waiting for a big one, and I've never seen a big one. One of my boys killed about an 18.5-inch skull.
Wow. Yeah, that's a nice
cinnamon.
one.
So
Yeah.
they do get bigger.
I got lucky and shot my first one was a beautiful light blonde cinnamon with my bow. And then I went a long time in between. And then last year I shot like a reddish chocolate colored one. Not really super blonde, but not something I see a whole ton of, but it seems to be kind of regional, it just,
Right.
I don't know,
Right.
just pockets of them.
It's definitely a regional genetic. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, it's just in pockets.
Oh, yeah.
But
they're
everywhere.
Scattered all over, except the coast. I don't think I've ever seen a colored one on the coast, just jet black.
I don't know of any.
Oh, they got the blue bears down there.
Well,
Yeah,
sure,
there's
but
that,
I don't even know if those exist. It's just legends.
I've killed 2 cinnamons and both on the same bait. Cinnamon chocolate.
Yeah, that's true.
Yep.
That's
you
true.
were probably there for both of them, weren't you?
I was. I
Yeah.
filmed both of them.
That's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
We filmed that first one?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have that?
Yeah, I'll send you the
I
footage.
didn't realize we had that. It's been a long time.
Yeah, that one you shot him with your bow and he ran
I
off
did.
10 yards and sang the blues to us.
I haven't killed any bears that have gone very far.
Yeah.
Got him in the right spot.
Well, let's take a break real quick. Hammer Bullets produces what we at the Northern Hunter consider to be the most premium and best working monolithic bullets on the market today. These bullets are easy to load, extremely accurate, and best of all, they're always in stock and ready to ship. The guys at Hammer designed them so that after penetrating the hide of an animal, it sheds its petals, initiating a massive energy dump while retaining the rear shank for maximum penetration. These bullets are built with 100% focus on how they perform on game, and their proprietary designs produce great BCs with specialized pressure grooves for amazing inherent accuracy and speed. They have a minimum expansion velocity of 1,800 feet per second, which allows for long-range shots, but with no maximum velocity, making them perfect for every cartridge from your granddaddy's old 30-30 to the high-velocity round like the Weatherby 30-378 without having to worry about your bullet failing. To view their expansive selection and find the perfect match for your hunting needs, go to hammerbullets.com and use discount code TheNorthernHunter to drop the hammer on your next adventure. All right, so you've obviously hunted quite a few bears. I mean, you said it was up in the 400s is just the black bears you've been on. I'm sure there were a few close calls, close encounters along those lines. And one thing we like to talk about is the reality of bear hunting is you're going to be close to bears and what to expect in those situations. Just dive into a couple of your favorite stories as far as close bear encounters or just funny, scary stories or anything like that.
Well, I'm proud to say I have not had very many close calls with bears, and I chalked that up to sort of proof of I'm not scared of bears, but I have a ton of respect for bears, even the scrawny ones.
Absolutely.
And an abundance or an overabundance of caution on my part. Some of it stemming from not wanting to get sued by a client, but be that as it may.
Whatever the reason, right?
Whatever the reason, the net result's pretty good.
Yeah.
I had at one time I operated under the theory that the closer I was to a brown bear, the less likely it was for a stirred up client to screw up the shot.
Yeah.
And then I got the other side of that coin one day when I got up to within about 30 yards of a brown bear and told this guy, go ahead and shoot him through the shoulder, and he shot him in the front foot.
Oh, no.
And so what I realized from that, and there was some excitement to go with cleaning up after that, but here I am, so it didn't turn out bad. What I realized that was at 30 yards, the guy's probably going to be a worse shot because he's even more nervous.
Right.
But I just I don't like clients shooting at brown bears at 100 yards. I just don't. Don't like it.
A lot of room for error.
Yep. I said I did a fair amount of guiding on Kodiak. One of the more notable times there was working for Leon, and in fact, Leon was guiding this guy, and I was with him as a German hunter, and he no speaky very much English, and it was a real hot day, and we came upon a big brown bear, who didn't quite look as big because he was in a tundra pond and he was all wet, so he didn't appear as fluffy and everything. So
Yeah.
But Leon and I talked about it. We decided, it's probably a pretty good bear. So we snuck down there. Well, now we got to keep the guy from shooting the bear while it's in the tundra pond.
Yeah.
And he was really antsy about shooting the thing. And the bear started to climb out of the pond. And before we could keep him from shooting it, just as he got to the top of the bank, he shot, and the bear fell back into the pond.
Oh no.
And so what you got to understand is you got a German client that paid thousands of dollars to hunt brown bear. You got a master guide, and you got a young assistant guide. Guess who gets to strip down and go into ice cold water?
Yep.
That'd be me. And I rolled around in there with that bear for a while, and it was not coming out of that pond. And it turned out it was a big bear. But what we ended up, when I say what I ended up doing was cutting that bear in half around the middle, and then we rolled each half out.
Wow.
And that German client just about pooped a pickle when we started cutting around the middle of the bear instead of making the more traditional cuts. But that was the only way to get that thing out of there.
Wow.
And man, it weighed a ton. I got to carry the whole soggy thing too.
Yeah.
With the head and paws in it was like over 150 pounds.
Yeah.
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 Bad. But, then down in 13, where I guided moose hunters for a while with some other people from this area, we had moose meat in camp, and we were sleeping in a cabin. Some of the people around, we had several guides and several hunters at this cabin, and some people had been sleeping on the porch, but it was kind of soggy out and that sort of thing. So there's only 4 bunks in the cabin. Those were full. There was 3 of us sleeping on the floor. And as luck would have it, I was the one closest to the door. And in the middle of the night, we hear the telltale padding around of a large bear outside the cabin, and the snuffling that indicates that he's really interested in things on the porch there. And then for a minute or two, I didn't hear him, but I knew he was out there still. And one of the other guides says, "Well, pound on the wall and scare him off." He was sleeping in the middle on the floor, and he didn't have a wall to pound on. I was sleeping by the door, so I reached up and pounded on the door, whereupon the door opened, and I was looking up out of the sleeping bag at a brown bear that was about 2 feet away from me.
Oh,
But luckily, he didn't like looking at me either, and he took off. But it was pretty exciting. Somebody turned on a flashlight. It would have been a lot nicer to.
or make sure it was latched.
You know, everybody thinks of having adventures with brown bears and grizzly bears, but when you've been in on over 400 black bear kills, there have been black bear stories too. And one of my favorites involves a bear that I didn't kill, but a friend of mine at Fish and Game called me to let me know that somebody had come in to seal a bear at Fish and Game over here on College Road, and given the mile marker where they had shot that bear, and she knew that the Fish and Game employee knew that I had a bait right there. I didn't have any secrets from Fish and Game.
Mm-hmm.
And the other problem was that bear that the hunter was getting sealed turned out to be a lactating female, and troopers and Fish and Game were interested in it.
Mm.
And so my friend at Fish and Game called me and told me. So we knew that we had a big sow with 3 cubs a year on that bait, and I just assumed that that's who had given their life so that somebody could have a bear rug.
Mm-hmm.
And so my buddy and I parked at the road and walked in to look for a dead skinned bear that troopers could grab for evidence, and of course to see if we could see the cubs there. As we approached the bait, sure enough, there was 3 cubs monkeying around with the bait, and we looked around, but we didn't really expect to see a sow because this is where this dead sow had at least theoretically come from. We got to within about 10 yards of the bait before those little goobers realized that we were there. And when they saw us, of course, they went right up a spruce tree, but spruce tree was only, maybe 6 inches in diameter, if that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so we thought that was pretty cute. And we're still thinking, well, these are orphan cubs. We need to go back and tell Fish and Game. They'll come up and put them in a sack and take them somewhere and do whatever they do with them. And so we stood around trying to figure out where the carcass might be, and all of a sudden the mother of these cubs comes boiling up out of the brush and jumping up and down on logs with her front feet and making some really terrifying noises. And since we were looking for a dead bear and 3 cubs, we had not brought rifles with us.
Oh boy.
So I had a .357 revolver, and Leonard had a .45 ACP, and we whipped them out pretty quick. And boy, this sow was highly agitated because we were right there by those cubs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And every time she woofed, they would go higher in the tree. Well, if you start with a tree that's only this big around to begin with, the higher you go, pretty soon the lower you're going.
Yep. Yep.
Because that tree's tipping over to the front. And I sort of murmured to Leonard, and I said, them little things are going to drop out of there, and they're going to drop right on us, and she's going to pounce. He said, yeah, I think so. I think so too. But what are we going to do about it? I said, well, I don't know. You got the big gun. Do something. Well, what we decided was we would try and make it the 20 yards to the stand, which still was only 8 feet off the ground, but better than where we were standing underneath a branch that was about to rain baby bears.
Right.
And so we covered each other and backed slowly over there and climbed into the stand. And we were there for a few minutes, and another problem came to light, and that is we had figured we'd only be in there for a second or two, find this skin carcass, see if there's any cubs, and walk back out to the truck. We hadn't brought any mosquito dope with us.
Oh boy.
So we're sitting in the stand swatting mosquitoes, and And by this time, the little bears have come down out of the tree and are back working on the bait. And the sow is still, she won't come all the way in. And she's still agitated, clacking her jaws and this kind of thing. But man, when the mosquitoes started winning the war, we just decided, we got to do something else. So we fired a couple of rounds over into a log by her feet, and she took off, and they ran behind him. And then we came back the next day with rifles and found the skinned carcass of a different sow, and the troopers made the case, and everybody lived happily ever after.
Yeah.
But that was just one black bear story. But
Yeah.
As you guys who are familiar with being around bears and bear behavior, that's how a lot of bears get killed that don't need to be killed.
Yes.
Like that sow came up boiling up out of the brush. Did we gamble that she was going to stop before she got to us? Yes, but there were signs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think a lot of people have that misunderstanding too when they think about bears and whatnot. Is the black ones can be just as angry and temperamental and just as the grizzlies, you know. And it's like you don't want to let your guard down just because they're smaller. If anything, I would almost say they're more antsy just because they have to fight. For every scrap of everything they get. So
any black bears that live in grizzly country. Used to watching out for themselves and being scrappy. That's that's sure. But then another favorite story I have from the bear baiting department was I was guiding a married couple from Texas, and I had guided them before for moose or caribou or something. They came back in the spring to shoot black bears. Well, they hadn't mentioned anything to me, and they got off the plane. I waited and waited and waited, and they finally got off the plane. And here comes Carolyn on crutches. So, well, this is some intel that would have been good to know like a day or two ago. But I asked what the story was. Well, tennis injury.
Oh, boy.
I said, well, how are you going to get into the stand? Well, I think I can get up the ladder if, you push and help me get up there and everything. And so she's crippling around camp with the crutches, and we were using a cabin there, and so it wasn't a big deal. But so the first night we took her to the stand and took a couple extra people to help her get up there, and she got up in the stand, left the crutches at the bottom of the ladder, and got up. And they saw some bears, didn't see anything to shoot, and but the next night, we got her up in the stand, and like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, about the time I usually go and check on the guys. And in those days, you didn't have to be a quarter mile off the road, so this bait was only less than 100 yards from the road. And so I went to check on them, and the guide was out by the road, and there's no sign of Carolyn. What happened to Carolyn? Well, she's still in the stand. There was several bears around, but I came out because I knew you'd probably be back about then. And I said, okay, well, let's go see what's going on. Well, we got back in there and didn't get into the woods very far and hear quite a commotion. And here's a large enough to shoot black bear munching on the bottom of the ladder. and she knew she wasn't supposed to shoot unless we told her to shoot, so she hadn't shot the thing, which was fine. We ended up getting the bear finally, but we ran that bear off and then asked her if she wanted to keep hunting. Nope. We ran that bear off, and I said, "Let us help you down out of the stand." She came down that ladder like a squirrel, and I went racing off didn't even pick up her crutches, raced back to the truck, jumping deadfall, set a land speed record, got in the truck and locked the door. And she was cured.
Yeah, that's all it takes.
It's a miracle.
Call the medical board.
It's a miracle.
We found the solution.
Geez.
That's like that old hockey game quote from the Miracle on Ice, where the commentator right at the end, "Do you believe in miracles?" Yes.
A true testament to what adrenaline can do, right?
That's funny. That is very
immediate recovery.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's cool too because we like to pick people's brains about stories and close encounters and things like that because everybody has their own stories, of course, and everybody has their own experiences. But the consistent thing you see is that if you're smart and, like you said, have respect for the animals, 400 black bears later or plus 400 plus, a lifetime of guiding in the wilderness. Like you said it yourself, you haven't really had that many, crazy calls and whatnot. And I think a lot of that is a testament to just knowing what you're doing, keeping a cool head, and
I've been medevaced with a dislocated shoulder. I've stabbed myself in the knee, but I have not been chewed on by a bear.
Yeah, very good. How many brown bear kills do you think you've been a part of?
I didn't count those. I haven't done a ton of brown bear guiding. I'm sure it's less than 15.
Oh, okay. Right on.
Yeah.
It's not my thing. When I was trying to pay for a C-section baby and neither of us had an insurance, I did more guiding and did some more brown bear guiding. But in those days, it was not unusual to make a 21-day hunt for brown bear on Kodiak. So
yeah,
it's not a high numbers thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the availability was a little bit different down there too. Back then, probably wasn't all. I mean, it might have all been draw. I don't know. I guess that's a question for you.
I don't remember. I don't think it was on draw then.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was.
You mentioned earlier on about getting flown up when you were still in the military. You flew down to Cold Bay and then flew back north up on the peninsula in a goose. I got to see a Grumman goose firsthand at a little fishing village last fall where I flew down to the coast and guided a bear hunt for an outfitter that I'll tell you his name later, but I'm sure you're familiar with him. But, right down in that neighborhood anyway. And the pilot that lived in the village that didn't work for the outfitter had a 180 and a Grumman goose. And that goose was his pride and joy. And that was about the neatest old airplane that I've ever gotten to walk up to and take a look at and peek inside. And I wanted so desperately bad to go for a ride in that thing. There's not a lot of those around anymore. And that is his baby. He loves that airplane.
Yeah.
He drives a 50-year-old pickup truck, it seems like, but he loves his goose. That's it's a beautiful plane.
It's a workhorse.
Yeah.
Land in the salt water and taxi up onto the beach.
Yeah.
And always remember to make sure the wheels are up when you land in the salt water.
That seems like a good way to end up back end over tea kettle.
When I first got to town here, I was still in the military, and I got loaned to BLM to work on some timber inventory over west of Nenana, and we flew in a Grumman goose that the OAS was running for the feds then.
Wow. Very cool.
And that one that we chartered down there belonged to Flying Tigers when they were they had the charter outfit out of Cold Bay.
Interesting. So you mentioned that you carried a 338 Win Mag all those years, and you said that you used open sights. Never used a scope for anything?
Well, it got to the point where my eyes got to where now I have to use a scope on everything. So.
Yeah. But just for the guiding side of it,
for the guiding, I always used open sights.
What bullets did you prefer in that?
I like Nosler bullets, and the heavier the better. For a guide gun, you're not supposed to shoot it.
Yeah.
Right. That's the theory.
So the theory goes.
Yeah.
And I didn't shoot it a lot. I explained to hunters that, if you can even see it, think about wiggling. If you see the wind blow the hair a little bit and you think it might be a wiggle, just shoot it again. Taxidermists got plenty of needles and thread. They'll sew up the holes.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Way better to sew up a hole than have an uh-oh.
Yeah. Or have to sew up a hole in you.
Yeah. Yeah, taxidermists are cheaper than surgeons. That's for sure.
That's true.
Not by much, but
yeah.
So you carried that thing for pretty much your entire guiding career then.
Yeah. Here's another interesting fact: is it never had a sling on it.
Oh, yeah.
And I never allowed my assistant guides or packers to have slings when we were hunting brown bears.
One of my original mentors had that rule.
That's it.
No slings.
In your hand.
Yep. Because otherwise it goes on your back, and then when you need it, it's just, however many extra seconds it takes.
And here's another interesting factoid. Before the rules changed, I would, when I was, I'd fly out of Fairbanks to Anchorage and then to Kodiak on Ween, I wouldn't even put it in a case.
Mm-hmm.
I just put my name tag on it because they'd throw cases around, but that they could.
That's a good point.
A little more
I
gingerly.
didn't have a scope. What was gonna happen?
Yeah.
Man, I was growing up. My dad was a pilot, just private pilot and stuff, and he flew around mostly for fun. But I read a lot of books about pilots, early pilots, Noel Ween, Bob Reeves, several airlines that you've mentioned, and I wasn't here for any of that, but it's really cool just to hear about that.
Yeah.
And we had several guys here in town that flew for those old
Mhm.
airlines. Yeah, Peter Mary was a guide when he hit Killick that flew for Ween and just a ton of old guys who were in on those formative days of commercial air traffic in
Alaska.
And it's so cool to be old enough that I've talked to those guys.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's a neat part of the state's history is kind of growing, from statehood and then expanding, and then that whole guiding industry changing, and
Yeah.
really a lot changed in Alaska through that time period. I mean, that was a huge growth section in Alaska's history. It's
Mhm.
very cool.
Yeah.
Very neat. Sorry, I was just going to ask just one more final question. Was your rifle a Model 70?
Why, yes, it was.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know how I guessed that, but it seems to be a common theme in a lot of the outfitters that I've talked to.
Yeah. Well, I've got two questions, kind of all tying back to the whole rifle thing and bear thing. I mean, we talk a lot about bears this time of year because it's something we all love and it's relevant to the current season. But
Yep.
during your time, I mean, what all did you guide for? I mean, was it, what was like your bread and butter? Was it bears, or were you more? Did you do a lot more like
No, it was
moose
sheep-
guiding,
Sheep and grizzly.
sheep and grizzly? Yeah.
I had that shoulder injury in 1979, and that kind of cured me of really wanting to do more moose stuff. But I did it anyway. In 1985, I had my first hernia operation, and Dr. Bill Montano here in town sewed that up, and I went, while I was waiting to recover from all that, I went through my diaries, and at that time, I had carried something like 47,000 pounds of moose meat on my back. Meat moose that I had shot and clients that I had guided and that kind of stuff. And that obviously explained the hernia.
Wow.
And so soon thereafter, within a year or so, I threw in with some people that had track rigs, bombardier, muskeg tractors, which made life a lot easier.
Yeah.
And so most of my moose hunting after that was done with those track rigs. Here, I don't know, it's probably been 10 or 15 years ago, I got a call from Number One Son on a Sunday night about 7:00. He said, Dad, I killed a moose this afternoon. Oh, that's great. He says, that's the first one I killed when you weren't with me. I said, man, that's great, man. You've been paying attention. He says, I need some things. I said, what do you need? He said, well, I need a Coleman light, and I need a saw, and I need meat bags. I basically need everything except a rifle. And I said, well, come by and get that stuff. He came by and he loaded it all up in the truck. And he said, you want to go with me? No.
Right.
I said, where is it? He says, well, it's behind it's about 2.5 miles behind a locked gate. I said, get some of your, he was on the fire department at the university at the time. I said, get some of your firefighter buddies to go with you. So he did. He called a couple of them and they went up with flashlights and did it all.
Oh, man.
After dark, and made it to work the next morning at 8:00, and he called me later in the morning. He said, "Well, we got it out. We took little plastic sleds and we scooted it all out of there and carried it in our packs and this kind of stuff." He says, I got to thinking, Dad. He says, when I was moose hunting with you, we never shot a moose in a place like that. It was always someplace where you could drive a four-wheeler to it or land an airplane by it or pull the boat up on the beach or get a horse to it. He says, that wasn't a mistake, was it? I said, no.
Reference back to the first story you told on the show.
Welcome to my hernia.
Wow.
So, what was along the sheep? You carried this 338 through sheep hunting and everything? I mean,
no, actually, when I was sheep hunting, unless I suspected I was going to have grizzly problems, in which case I would carry the 338 still.
Mm-hmm.
But I brought with me to Alaska a 7mm Rem Mag,
beautiful
ultra rifle, Harrington and Richardson ultra rifle, that my dad had bribed me with. Told me if I ever got off of the academic probation and made the real dean's list at forestry college, that he'd buy me something nice, and I had him buy me that 7mm. And so I've had that thing for like 60 years. And
wow.
So that's what I carried when I was sheep hunting. But I can't ever remember having to shoot at a sheep that a client had started.
Good.
But when I go back through my diaries a lot, you're probably getting that as a common thread.
Oh, sure.
It's
the point of
average shot that my clients made at sheep was well under 75 yards.
Really?
Wow.
Nice.
We believed in getting close and not taking, shooting from one side of the canyon to the other.
Yeah. It's a lot shorter walk to get to a dead ram when you shoot him that close.
Yeah, you don't have to walk to the next glacier.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
I'll say, and you can get there.
Right.
That's the other big thing.
Yeah.
And that's where we all like to shoot long range, whether it be for entertainment purposes or for hunting purposes. We've actually gotten to a point, at least Dalton and I, where we've limited our ranges because we know what we're capable of, but we also know the dangers involved in that.
Yeah.
And you see crazy with people shooting, deer and whatnot out 1,200 plus yards. And I mean, that might be great in, some of those open plain areas in the lower 48. But I mean, up here, you shoot a moose at 750.
There's two lakes in
There
between.
might be a river, a canyon. Like you had said, you shoot a sheep that far. Is there a that you have to maneuver around, and it's going to take you 2 days to get over there to it. I mean, that's all things you have to consider. It's not just can you make the ethical shot, but it's also
plus if you're shooting at a moose at that range, your projectile is losing a lot of horsepower by the time it gets there too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever have any bow hunter clients for sheep over the years?
I did not. I had a friend that bow hunted, and I carried a rifle and went along with him. And funny you should mention that, because it makes me think of a story.
Perfect.
He had drawn a TMA permit, took Trophy Management Area permit, and he stuck an arrow in a sheep, and it took a while to get to that sheep, but we did.
Mm-hmm.
And so we propped it up in the snow, and he draped his bow across the back of the sheep's head, just right behind the horns, and we stood back and started taking pictures. And one thing that we hadn't taken into consideration was the body heat of that ram, and as it heated up, it melted some of that snow that was underneath that ram. And all of a sudden, with a great whoosh, that puppy takes off down the mountain with his bow attached to the horns. And we had to chase it a good 150, 200 yards. And I thought it was going in the glacier and we're never going to see it again. I said to myself, well, I'm glad that's not my bow.
Right.
Wow.
Good.
There's another good lesson for folks.
But I never had a lot of bow hunters for sheep.
What about handgun hunters for sheep? You ever do any of that?
Nope.
Hmm.
No. I had a lot of bow hunters ask me about bears. I always discouraged it. But one guy's check is as good as the next. I would have taken them. I wouldn't have liked it. But
Yeah.
You mean for like brown bears or for bear over bait?
We killed tons of black bears over bait with
just
with
spot and
handguns.
stalking.
But
Brown
no,
bears.
I'm sorry. I was talking about mostly grizzlies.
Yeah.
Grizzlies and sheep was what I spent most time guiding for.
Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah. How many years did you spend guiding sheep hunts, do you think?
From the beginning to the end.
Man.
Wow. Yeah. So about 40 years ago.
Probably guided my first sheep hunter in 1975.
Wow.
And my last one probably maybe 10 years ago.
Wow. What's the biggest ram that you ever hauled off the mountain?
43 and a half.
Wow. That's a big ram.
That's a big ram.
I wished I'd shot it.
Right.
It was an old guy, overweight, in not very good shape, but he did everything we asked him to do.
Yeah. Good.
He didn't try and guide the guide.
Yeah.
If we said, no, we're not going up this side, we're going up over here, he would trudge along with us, and he ended up getting a 43 and a half inch ram.
Wow.
That's amazing.
It was
Good for him.
It won the Alaska Professional Hunters Association Big Sheep Award for that year.
Beautiful.
Man.
Do you know what his official inch score number was?
It was about, it was like 167 or something like that.
That's a big sheep.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a big one.
It always just kind of goes to show, put the hard work in, have a good attitude, it'll pay off.
Well, my theory for clients was always keep up, shut up, and shoot straight.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good advice.
You get that under control, everything else falls into place.
Yep. Enjoy the camp food.
I can say that now that I'm not trying to book hunters.
Yeah. What was the evolution of your food in your guide camps over the years? Because going from the 70s up until 10 years ago, you saw the complete evolution of lightweight food and what we have now and freeze-dried meals.
Even when I first started, it wasn't 2 or 3 years after I started that Mountain House became a thing.
Okay. Yeah.
There wasn't much of a selection, but there was Mountain House, and that was important for sheep hunters. But before that, when in the early 70s, like when I was working for Red, I can remember packing, cans of beans and whole potatoes and all this kind of stuff.
Bacon.
Yeah. No, canned bacon, those yellow and red cans of bacon.
Yeah. They can pack a lot of bacon in a can, surprisingly enough.
Yeah, and every once in a while they make it taste like bacon too.
Oh man. Well, any other crazy stories from the guide times?
There probably are, but those are the things I can remember tonight.
There you go.
I was going to bless you with my theory on record books.
Yes,
I would love to hear that.
The first time I went to enter something in a record book, I don't remember what record book it was. Doesn't matter. But I said, I got to pay to do this.
Yeah.
And I made up my mind early on that my goal would not be to shoot like all 28 North American species or whatever the magic number is these days.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would try and do is have something, at least one entry in each book, which was far more fun, and nobody else was interested in doing it. I'm the only one, as far as I know, that got infatuated with doing that. So, I've got a couple things in Boone and Crockett. I've got a couple things in Pope and Young. I've got one thing in SCI. I got one thing in Roland Ward, and I got several things in the muzzleloader book, the Long Hunter book.
Nice.
And so I'm happy, and I don't enter things anymore. And I've got several things on the wall at home that, if I wanted to bother to do it, would even qualify for Boone and Crockett.
Yeah.
I mean, just, goofy stuff like a mountain lion and stuff like that. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to pay the money to see my name in print.
Right.
Speaking of mountain lions, have you ever heard the rumors about us having a couple of lions occasionally up here? And do you have any theories or ever see one yourself?
No, I doubt we have mountain lions here. I know they eventually make their way down the Stikine and southeast and that sort of thing, but I just can't imagine we have anything here.
Yeah. The theory is that they come up in the summertime and spring, basically following, rogue mule deer.
The mystery mule deer.
Yeah. And
they exist.
And they come up and either they go back south before the winter happens or they die. They don't.
I've had people show me trail cam pictures that they claimed were mountain lions and they were, house cats.
Yeah.
Right.
Biggins, but still.
Eating a lot of shrews out there.
Yeah.
That's funny.
It's kind of funny. You mentioned the record books and your opinion on those. And I kind of had a moment where I just got turned off to those back in the day. I kind of had the same, I don't know, I just visions of grandeur, that, oh yeah, I'm going to try and get the biggest this and the biggest that. And it was when I found out you have to pay to be in the book. That's what it was. I'm like, so this isn't even like the real records. Like there might be something way bigger than number one that the guy wasn't willing to pay to have his name put on there.
That's the fun part of our theory.
Yeah. It was like, so you're just, I don't know, that kind of turned me off to it. And then,
well, I don't mind if other people do it. That's fine.
Mhm.
Help yourself.
Yep.
You're paying money to Pope and Young or SCI. Good on you. That's a good cause. I just don't have any interest in it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep. That's true.
Did you ever shoot any wolves?
I have. Well, I've trapped it.
Trapped them. Yeah.
Ton of wolves, but it just shooting wolves. No, I have not shot one myself. I've had several clients shoot wolves. In fact, I had a client shoot a collared ear tag wolf back in the late 80s, early 90s sometime, and I dutifully took the collar and the ear tags into Fish and Game like you're required to do, and slapped them up on Bill Stevenson's desk. And he says, "That's not one of my collars." He says, "It's not a Park Service collar." He says, "Let me work on that for a while." And he called around, and that wolf had been tagged as a yearling pup over near Rat River in the Northwest Territories.
Really?
And had followed the caribou all the way across into Alaska and gone west of the Haul Road. It's pretty cool.
Wow.
Huh.
That's insane.
It is amazing just how far animals will travel.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, when you're talking about like lynx migrations too,
Mhm.
I mean, just them cats, and they'll travel same thing from the Northwest Territories all the way down, through the brooks and everywhere and down south.
Going
and
where the
get
bunnies
found,
are.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
get found down in Fairbanks. It's like,
Yeah.
it's crazy to
Mhm.
think that a cat, this is,
Moving
crossing
that far. Yeah.
that many miles.
I've bumped into lynx in places that I did not think there should be cats. I was guiding a brown bear hunt on the coast 2 or 3 years ago, and a cat walked through camp at night while we were sitting there glassing for bears down the coastline.
Mhm.
And I thought, man, are my eyes playing tricks on me? First thing I thought was it's a small deer, right? Because it's
Mhm.
long-legged and it's tan.
Or a short-tailed one of them imaginary mountain lions you were talking about.
Well, right. But yeah, quickly, upon further inspection with the binoculars, it was a lynx, and it was a long ways from where I thought they lived. And I came out of the field and talked to Fish and Game about it, and they said, yeah, they're pushing down, like you said, because they're following the prey populations, and they're booming down here right now.
Souped up wildcat.
Yeah, souped up wild.
As Jerry Clowers would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, in boy, this is really getting far afield, but in New Jersey, they have reintroduced in northern New Jersey bobcats.
Oh,
And one of the places they thought would be a really terrific place to dump them out was all around my place on Hamburg Mountain.
oh,
And which is great, except you're not supposed to catch them.
oh.
And you can't use traps there. You have to use snares. And so I'm snaring coyotes and fox, and I knew it was going to happen eventually, and I ended up catching a bobcat this year. Well, if you look in the book solution is you call the Fish and Game and DEP people, and they have a kitty cat rescue team that comes and gives it happy juice and lets it out, and away it goes. Well, if you catch anything in the cat family around the neck, it chokes down pretty quick. Somehow this one had gotten caught around the middle in a coyote snare. And so I said to myself when I saw it there, I said, "Ooh, might have a problem here," but I don't really want to call Fish and Game. I have let a lot of lynx out of wolf traps when our wolf season goes later than the lynx season here, and I've caught lynx in wolf traps and I've let them out. Well, I learned that there's some differences between a trapped lynx and a snared bobcat. One is bobcats are a lot bigger in terms of weight than lynx. I don't think I've caught more than a couple of lynx, and I've caught hundreds of them that weighed more than 30 pounds. And this joker was more like in the 50-pound range.
Really?
Man.
Yeah, he was healthy. And the other thing is when you catch a lynx in a trap, that means they're already down to just 3 feet. And you can generally back them up and let the pressure off the springs and let that last foot out of the trap. Well, when you've got a 50-pound bobcat snared around the middle, another difference between lynx and bobcat is apparently bobcats have like 150 claws on each foot. And they got all 4 of them working at one time. And so I went back to the house and got a blanket and finally got that thing wrapped up and then cut a hole in the blanket where the snare lock was and snipped it with cable cutters and let that thing out. And that was quite the experience.
You're just glad that he ran the other way.
I might just call the kitty cat rescue team next time.
That's funny.
I wasn't sure whether you had to call the kitty rescue team or whether that was just an option.
I see.
So a couple days after that, a retired game warden down there, a friend of mine, I invited him to lunch. I said, "Roger, do you have to call Fish and Game to let a bobcat out?" He says, "No, it's just an option. You caught one, didn't you?"
I have a question about wolves. You said that you trapped a bunch of wolves over the years.
Yeah.
What's the average overall weight and length of wolves? Because you see a lot of numbers thrown around.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of speculation about how heavy do wolves get and how long do they get. So over your years, what do you see?
I don't usually measure them, but I do weigh them because I like you, I noticed what people were talking about. And I'll start by telling you my overall theory is that most of the 150-pound wolves to 200-pound wolves that are caught on what I call Mahogany Ridge, which entails a bar. In real life, the heaviest wolf that I have ever caught and skinned weighed 121 pounds.
Okay.
And he had a belly full of moose meat.
Okay.
I have caught females that weighed under 50 pounds.
Yeah.
Yep.
Most of the male wolves that I've caught were like in the 85, 90, 100-pound.
Okay. Yeah. And then if you had to guess on length, are they average 6.5 to 7 foot overall length, or are they?
Depends what size skinning board you use, or stretcher boards.
Yeah.
I stretch my stuff really narrow, so I'm sure some from nose to base of tail would make better than 7 foot.
Yeah. I got a guy that I know that lives in a different part of the state, and he was putting up a couple of pictures today, and he just downed a wolf that measures, according to him, nose to base of tail 8 foot. And in the pictures, it looks bigger headed than a lot of black bears that I've seen.
Did he score the skull?
Not yet. I mean, he just shot it here just recently, so I'm sure he's going to, and I'm going to see him, before terribly long. So I'm going to ask him what it measures. I'll I'll show you the picture after we get off the air here. It is probably the biggest wolf, and this is a big guy that shot it.
Mm-hmm.
And the head is as wide as his chest. It's a huge wolf, monster.
Yeah.
I was just curious, just because that was fresh in my brain. Just curious about what the size
Did
is.
he weigh it before he skinned it?
No,
No.
This was a field picture, and he said,
Okay,
"Wow,
yeah.
check this out. This is huge." And he had a
Right.
tape with him because he had shot a bear last week. That he brings a tape to measure some stuff just while
Yeah.
it's not skinned yet, just out of curiosity.
Pete, did you ever score any of your wolf skulls or clients' wolf skulls?
No,
Yeah. Not
No.
paying for that.
Not really a record books guy.
not a record book guy.
No, it's just
Yeah.
it's
You know,
an
just
interesting thing.
the idea of a client tripping over a wolf and then generally using like a caribou tag or a black
Uh-huh.
bear tag
Right.
to put on it, a species of equal or lesser value.
Mhm.
The trophy quality is not nearly as exciting as the
Right.
fact that we just shot a wolf.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely,
Right. No, I
yeah,
get it. I
exactly.
just curiosity, because that's another thing I've not seen. I shot a big wolf, probably not as big as the one you're talking about, but I haven't entered it, but it scored real high on the record books. And so that's a question I ask now. It's like, how big
Yeah.
was the skull? Like, because it was well north of 100 pounds.
Yeah, it was probably just over the 100-pound.
Because I bent over to pick it up, and I couldn't just pick it up like I thought I was going to be able to. Like, I've picked up wolves I've shot before.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. He and I had to carry 2 legs at a time, and we were
Yeah.
out of breath in 100 yards. It was
a big
stout.
wolf.
Stout wolf.
Yeah.
Definitely a good killer.
What would you say in your experience? Have you noticed a lot of the wolf movements over your trapping time? I mean, as far as like moving into an area and moving out of an area, and is there like a cycle that they tend to go through up here?
Well, most of the cycles I had to deal with were cycles of airborne wolf control stuff.
Oh, true.
I
Especially
trapped
in
on
that
the
time.
Tanana Flats there in 20A, and so every few years there was another wolf control project, and
Right.
and I bore the brunt of that, as did the other trappers out there. But it was for it's for a better cause. It's for more moose, so I'm not going to cry about it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I've caught wolves. I caught a wolf on Thanksgiving Day, 1975, right behind a ski lodge on Fort Wainwright. I've caught wolves within 2 or 3 miles of downtown to the south, just across the river.
Mhm.
The wolf populations come and go in 20.
Yeah. Yeah, I know my buddy lives out in North Pole, and he actually lives in the home that he grew up in, and he was telling me a story about shooting a wolf that was in the backyard, and just right there along by
Well,
by Chena Lakes.
In the
So,
fall of 1975, we had problems with wolves coming into town and eating dogs. Somebody'd come out.
yeah, yep,
And, they'd follow the chain from the doghouse out, and there'd be nothing but a red stain in the snow at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And but that turned out to be that wolf that I caught at Fort Wainwright was a female that was also working off the dump there, and her
Mhm.
teeth were all worn down from gumming tin cans. And then a friend of mine who worked as a wildlife biologist at BLM caught 3 young wolves over Rissy Road or Esro Road off of Chena Hot Springs.
Mhm.
And once those 4 wolves, that the bitch that I caught and the 3 young ones that he caught over there, almost all the dog killings around town stopped. So it was just
Yeah.
that little bunch of
wow,
wolves that were working on dogs in the Goldstream Valley and Chena Hot Springs Road and that area out there.
yeah,
Steel Creek.
yeah.
What do you think the ratio of gray wolves to black wolves is, that just in what you've caught? Would you say that you've...
Depends where you go. I would say in 20A it was probably close to half and half.
Wow. Yeah, I'm just always curious about that.
Yeah.
I've got a friend that was guiding up in the northern half of the state, and he saw a pack that was completely all just black wolves, and it was a big pack. I've never seen anything like that. I've seen packs of them where there's a couple of black ones.
Mm.
I think the biggest one I saw was, I think it was 5 or 6 black, and then the rest of them gray, and it was like a pack of a dozen or something like that, which was a big pack for that area.
No, I've seen a lot of blacks on the North Slope in 26 where I was guiding. And in fact, that collared wolf from the Northwest Territories that I had a client take, that wolf was black.
Mm-hmm.
That's very cool. Yeah, wolves are interesting creatures.
Yeah. No, I'm always fascinated by their movements and their behaviors because you noticed my Yellowstone shirt I was wearing today. You asked me about it earlier. And while I was down, so I went down there in the wintertime. My wife and I with her family, and we were down there over New Year's, basically. I don't like people. Decide to go places when there's the least amount of people there, right? I had the pleasure. We were in there for 2 days or so, and we ran into the wolf pack running around, or one of the wolf packs running around Yellowstone. And I ran into a gentleman, I think his name was Rick McIntyre, and he apparently was a huge wolf biologist up here for a long time, worked down in the Denali Range, and studied wolves, and then moved down there to Yellowstone to study them down there. And we were sitting there on a pair of spotting scopes and looking at these wolves, and he's telling me all these just spouting facts about them and their movements down there and everything. And I was really curious how that applies to the ones up here, especially when you have such a much bigger range. I mean, that one, that collared one you shot, I mean, just moving that far away, I mean, like to think about
if somebody dumped him out in Yellowstone, he could go to Connecticut.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, when you put it in that perspective, that's huge. I mean,
Right.
It's like it's
Right.
insane to think that
Yeah.
and you might have got pushed out for whatever social reason, and then just kind of followed the caribou because there wasn't a pack anymore or whatever, or maybe started a new pack, and like their social structure is just really, really interesting.
Here's a useless little known fact for you. The guy that did the helicopter work and caught all those wolves in British Columbia and moved them down to the park years ago, when was it, 95, was a guy from here in Fairbanks.
I was just going to try to find and see if I could look up how many miles Rat River is from the west side of the Brooks. Just because
That's a distance.
as the wolf runs or as the crow flies.
Well, and it's not NWT anymore. It's got some sexy name to go with it.
Yeah, I mean, Rat River is way over there.
Oh yeah, it's not right on the border.
No.
That's where the mad trapper's from.
Right.
Man.
That's
right.
I was just going to say, I just watched a 45-minute documentary on YouTube about that
did
guy. I was absolutely enthralled with that
They
story.
made a movie. I haven't seen the movie, but they made a movie.
I heard they made a movie. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to read the book, and then I might watch the movie.
There you go.
But that documentary on YouTube, it was on the History Channel or something. I mean, they dug up his body and everything. Still can't figure out who the sucker was. That makes the story even better.
He was someone who wanted to be left alone.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Didn't want to put anything in the record book.
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh, he's in the record books. That's for sure.
Rat River to the west side of the Brooks is over 1,200 miles. Wow.
That's crazy.
The distance.
To go on foot.
Yeah.
A 6 foot long animal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he probably
crazy.
didn't weigh no 120 pounds after that walk.
No.
Living on caribou.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Just hauling them around. But,
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I think we just crossed into the 2-hour club. So congratulations on that. That's we've got a 3 and a 4-hour club. So this is a good middle ground here.
The 4-hour club was a small
I don't
group.
have any interest in that record book either. The way we measure success is not by the number of hours of me telling stories. It's by how many books I sell as a result.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you take a second and remind these people how they can get that book?
One more time, my email, petebuist, petebuist @gmail.com. That's all lowercase. And drop me an email and we'll work out how we're going to get it to you. And $25 gets you an autographed copy, and most of the stories are true.
And
I
just
love
a
it.
reminder, that title is Me Caribou is on Fire.
Yep.
I've read that book. Thomas at Sportsman's told me about it when it first came out. I was in there, jaw jacking with him, and he said, "Did you see that Pete came out with a book?" And I had known your name. I'd
You
heard
said
about
Pete
you
who?
around
I know
town.
what you said.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I had heard about that book coming out, but I couldn't seem to find out where I could get it. And so Thomas loaned me his copy.
Mhm.
And so then when I ran into you last week there, I said, well, how about this? How about you come do a podcast and I'll take a couple of books off your hand. So
Yeah,
Yep.
done deal now. But yes, thanks for coming on the show. It was a pleasure having you on here. We'll have to do it again and tell sheep hunting stories sometime. That would be fun.
I got some of them too.
Yeah. That's why I kind of wanted to delineate between the bear stories for now, and then we can have you on again because you've got so many years of experience. That's valuable information. I could listen to that all day.
Absolutely.
There's a sheep story in there for you.
Yes.
and also, I just want to thank you for all the services you've provided for the
Yes.
outdoor industry over the years. I mean, serving on the board of game and the president of the Trappers Association and all of that. I mean, that's huge responsibilities to take on in addition to family and work and all those other things. So I really appreciate everything you've done for the outdoors community here in Alaska. So
I like being useful to the conservation community.
we appreciate it. All right, folks. Well, thank you very much for listening. If you would be so kind, send Mr. Buist here a email and get that book. It's full of great stories. As you can tell, he's got plenty of them. So make sure you get it directly from him if possible. That is the
Yes.
best way to support people who write books and do any kind of production. So is direct sales are always better. And if you have any questions for the show, make sure you go to thenorthernhunter.com, hit that contact button, and that will get an email directly to us. If you'd like to support us, we've got our partners page on the website as well. That'll get you to the companies that have decided to sponsor what we're doing here at the Northern Hunter. We've got discount codes with a lot of them. As long as they're on the website, they're active. And so go ahead and hit those links. Get on there and use those discount codes. That'll help you get some good gear and help us continue what we're doing. We've also got a shop page that's full of merch. It's a growing page. We're going to have some more designs coming out throughout the whole summer season. But right now, our latest one is our God Save the King hoodie and t-shirt set. We've got, it's a really cool design. It's kind of based around the whole issue with the king salmon. We're going to be having a couple episodes coming up soon talking about that and kind of the reasons and the solutions that are at hand that could possibly make a difference for that. And if you want to help bring awareness to the issue and maybe even help us raise some money to push for better management of that resource, then go ahead and pick up that t-shirt. It's right there in the shop and comes in a lot of different sizes and colors. So that's all we have. Pete, thank you one more time for spending your evening with us. And everybody else, until next week, get out there, get after it, and good luck. We'll see you there.